What if everything you thought you knew about someone was a lie? A devoted mother, tirelessly caring for her sick and disabled daughter. A young girl, trapped in a body that constantly failed her. A community that rallied around them, showering them with love, donations, and even a brand new house. But behind the smiling photos and charity events was a nightmare no one saw coming. A daughter who could walk, a mother who wasn't who she claimed to be, and a murder that shocked the world. This is the story of Dee Dee, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a case of deception, abuse, and desperation so twisted that it still haunts people to this day. Stay with me until the end, because this case isn't just about a crime. It's about the horrifying truth hiding in plain sight. And trust me, you won't believe how it all ends. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe if you love true crime stories. And let me know in the comments, do you think justice was truly served in this case?
One day this will be real. And now it finally is.
The illusion of illness. Imagine a little girl, fragile and pale, seated in a wheelchair. Her oversized glasses resting on her small face. Her mother stands behind her, a reassuring hand on her shoulder, smiling warmly at the crowd gathered around them. The little girl's head is shaved smooth, as if she had just undergone another round of chemotherapy. A feeding tube snakes out from her nose, connecting her to a bag of liquid nutrients. This was the image the world saw of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. A sick child, a warrior battling one disease after another, a daughter fiercely loved by a devoted mother. But if you look closer, if you really look, you might have noticed something was off. The house they lived in, a small pink home built by Habitat for Humanity, had its walls covered in medical posters. Inside, shelves overflowed with pill bottles and syringes. Hospital beds and oxygen tanks filled Gypsy's bedroom, reinforcing the idea that she was in constant need of medical attention. And then there was Dee Dee. Dee Dee Blanchard carried herself like a saint. She had the soft, soothing voice of a mother who had spent years comforting a sick child. Her hands, always fussing over Gypsy, adjusting her oxygen tube, wiping her face, making sure she looked sick enough, never rested. She recited Gypsy's medical conditions like a well-rehearsed script: leukemia, muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, asthma, vision impairment, hearing loss, severe allergies, and even brain damage. She's been sick since she was just a baby, Dee Dee would say, her voice heavy with sadness. Doctors didn't think she'd live past 5. People listened with wide eyes, their hearts breaking for this poor little girl. Charities stepped in. Make-A-Wish gave her dream trips to Disney World. Celebrities sent her gifts. Doctors, though puzzled by the sheer number of illnesses Gypsy supposedly had, didn't question Dee Dee's authority. After all, she was her mother. Who would know better than a mother? But Gypsy wasn't sick, not even a little. At home, behind closed doors, the illusion began to crack. Gypsy could walk perfectly fine, in fact, but she had been taught from an early age that if she stood up in front of people, there would be consequences. Dee Dee kept a firm grip on her, reinforcing the fear with subtle punishments. If Gypsy ever questioned her illnesses, Dee Dee's soft, loving voice would turn ice cold. "You are sick," she'd whisper harshly. "And if you ever try to walk, people will know you're lying, and we'll lose everything." Everything: the free house, the charity money, the medical perks, the admiration. For Gypsy, the line between truth and fiction had been blurred so much that she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Sometimes, late at night, she would tiptoe to the mirror and examine herself. Her legs looked strong, her skin looked healthy, nothing about her looked sick. But then, she would remember how doctors nodded solemnly when her mother spoke, how kind strangers donated money for her treatments, how everyone believed the story'd accept her. Was it possible that everyone else was right and she was the one who didn't understand? Dee Dee's control went beyond the medical lies. She kept Gypsy locked in a world where she was completely dependent. She homeschooled her, if you could even call it that, keeping her education at a second-grade level, just enough for her to read simple books and understand basic conversations. She convinced doctors that Gypsy had the mental capacity of a child, making sure they never spoke to her alone. She controlled what Gypsy ate, when she slept, who she spoke to, and even what she wore. She dressed her in babyish clothes, decorated her wheelchair with stickers and pink ribbons, and forced her to carry stuffed animals like a toddler. To the world, Gypsy was a forever child, frozen in time. To Dee Dee, she was the perfect source of endless sympathy. And to Gypsy, she was a prisoner. But prisoners, no matter how tightly locked away, always dream of escape. And one day, Gypsy would find her way out. But at a terrible, terrible cost. The breaking point. By 2012, Gypsy had discovered a world beyond her mother's control, the internet. Late at night, when Dee Dee was snoring in the next room, Gypsy would sit in the dim glow of the laptop screen, her fingers trembling as she explored a life that had been denied to her. She joined online forums, created secret social media accounts, and for the first time, she spoke to people as herself. No wheelchair, no feeding tubes, just Gypsy. And then, she met Nicholas John. Nick wasn't just an escape, he was an obsession. The two met on a Christian dating site, and what started as flirty messages quickly spiraled into something deeper, darker. Nick had his own struggles. He was socially isolated, diagnosed with autism, and harbored violent sexual fantasies. Gypsy didn't just accept his darkness, she embraced it. They created an elaborate fantasy world together, one where Nick had multiple alter egos, including a protective vampire-like persona who would do anything for his princess. For the first time in her life, Gypsy felt like she had power, and she wanted more. By 2014, Gypsy had tried escaping before. She had stolen her mother's phone, attempted to reach out for help, but every time, Dee Dee reeled her back in with threats, manipulation, and sheer force. The police had even been called once by a skeptical doctor, but Dee Dee always had an answer. Always had the medical records, the tears, the lies. Gypsy realized something horrifying. No one would ever believe her. If she wanted to be free, there was only one way. She has to die, she whispered to Nick in an online message. Nick didn't hesitate. It was a humid summer night in Springfield, Missouri. Inside their pastel pink home, filled with teddy bears and medical supplies, Dee Dee slept soundly in her bed. Gypsy left the door unlocked. Nick arrived, carrying a knife. Gypsy hid in the bathroom, hands pressed over her ears as the walls of her world shattered. The sounds of the struggle were muffled, but unmistakable: the rustling of sheets, the sharp intake of breath, the sudden thud as Dee Dee realized what was happening. She fought hard, but Nick was stronger. He stabbed her 17 times. The air was thick with the scent of blood, the echoes of gasping breaths, and then silence. Gypsy didn't cry. She didn't run. She stepped out of the bathroom, stepping over the lifeless body of the woman who had controlled her entire existence. She didn't feel guilt. She felt relief. Gypsy and Nick fled to a motel, where they celebrated their victory with fast food and sex. For the first time in her life, Gypsy could eat whatever she wanted, go wherever she pleased. She thought she had one, but freedom built on blood never lasts. The next day, Gypsy made a mistake. She posted a chilling message on Facebook from her mother's account. "That bitch is dead." It was meant to be a final act of defiance. Instead, it led the police right to their doorstep. Gypsy's world crashed down faster than she could have ever imagined. And in that moment, she realized her nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Legal proceedings and incarceration. The moment the gavel struck, sealing Gypsy Rose Blanchard's fate, the courtroom held its breath. But was this justice, or something else entirely? The trial of Gypsy Rose Blanchard was unlike any other. It wasn't just about a murder, it was about deception, manipulation, and years of silent suffering that no one had noticed. As the courtroom filled, the air was thick with tension. On one side sat Gypsy, small and frail looking, her brown eyes darting around the room. She was no longer the sickly, wheelchair-bound girl the world had been led to believe she was. Now, she was standing on her own, literally and figuratively facing the consequences of a crime that to some, was an act of liberation rather than murder. On the other side were the prosecutors, armed with evidence, blood-stained gloves, a knife, chilling text messages, a trail of digital footprints that led straight to Gypsy and Nicholas Gadajon. The state painted Gypsy as a cunning mastermind. She wasn't the victim here. They argued Dee Dee was. They laid out the facts in stark detail. Gypsy had plotted her mother's murder for weeks, manipulating Gadajon, an impressionable young man with a troubled past, into doing the deed. She had asked him to come to her house, leave the lights off, creep into her bedroom, and take a knife to her sleeping mother. Text messages between the two lovers were displayed on massive screens for the jury to see. The words were disturbingly casual. Gypsy, when you do it, just be quick and bring the knife. Nick, I will do anything for you, my love. Gypsy's fate hung in the balance as these words echoed through the courtroom. Gypsy's attorneys countered with a different narrative. This wasn't premeditated murder, it was survival. They described Dee Dee's iron grip over her daughter's life, the fabricated illnesses, the forced medications, the unnecessary surgeries, a childhood stolen, a body weakened, a mind manipulated. Doctors took the stand to confirm the unthinkable. Gypsy had been perfectly healthy all along. Her wheelchair, unnecessary. The feeding tube, a cruel facade. The shaved head, just another part of Dee Dee's grand illusion. The jury sat in stunned silence as medical records were presented, showing how Dee Dee had managed to fool entire hospitals, convincing surgeons to operate on a girl who didn't need surgery. It was abuse of the worst kind. But was it an excuse for murder? When the jury finally reached a decision, Gypsy sat motionless, her fingers twisting in her lap. The courtroom was silent, everyone holding their breath. Guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence, 10 years in prison. For many, it was shocking. Some believed she deserved a harsher sentence after all. She had planned the murder. Others saw her as a victim who had suffered enough. But there was no such mercy for Nicholas Gadajon. His trial, held separately, was much more straightforward. The man who had actually wielded the knife, stabbing Dee Dee to death in her own bed, showed little emotion as his own verdict was read. Guilty of first-degree murder, life in prison, no parole. Ironically, Gypsy's time in prison became the first real taste of freedom she had ever known. Gone were the feeding tubes and the wheelchairs. Gone were the endless doctor visits. In prison, she could walk freely, eat whatever she wanted, and speak to whomever she pleased. And she thrived. For the first time in her life, Gypsy had autonomy. She enrolled in classes, read books, made friends. Her letters to the outside world revealed something unexpected. She was happier in prison than she had ever been in her mother's home. I feel more free in here than I ever did with my mom, she wrote to a reporter. But the world wasn't done with her story just yet, because when Gypsy Rose Blanchard walked out of prison in 2023, her life took an even more unexpected turn. Life after prison. The cold steel gates of the Chillicothe Correctional Center slid open with a slow, grinding motion. For the first time in 7 years, Gypsy Rose Blanchard stepped out not as the frail, wheelchair-bound girl the world had once pitied, but as a free woman. The Missouri sky stretched wide above her, an endless blue she hadn't seen without the shadow of prison walls since she was 24. The December air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a stark contrast to the sterile, controlled environment she had called home for nearly a decade. She inhaled deeply, as if trying to take in the very essence of freedom itself. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Their voices blended into an incoherent hum as she stepped forward, gripping the hand of her husband, Ryan Anderson. He had been her support system during her final years behind bars, her confidant, her lifeline to the outside world. Now, they walked together into an uncertain future. The transition wasn't easy. After 7 years of strict routines, whispered conversations in dimly lit prison corridors, and the ever-present weight of institutional control, the real world felt almost unreal. The motion of a car moving freely down the highway made her stomach lurch. She wasn't used to the speed, the unpredictability of traffic weaving in and out. The hum of an engine was different from the cold, mechanical clanking of prison gates. The houses lining the streets weren't made of concrete and barbed wire. They had porches, wind chimes, Christmas lights flickering in the dusk. They felt alive. One of the strangest moments came when she stepped into a Walmart for the first time. The automatic doors whooshed open, revealing endless aisles of choices. Bright fluorescent lights buzzed above. The sheer variety of toothpaste, cereal brands, shampoo bottles, it was overwhelming. In prison, choices were limited to a few basic commissary items. Now, faced with rows upon rows of products, Gypsy hesitated, her fingers hovering over a bottle of vanilla-scented body wash. It smelled like childhood, like something Dee Dee might have picked for her. No matter how far she ran, Dee Dee's presence lingered in the smallest details. The way the overhead lights flickered in a dim hallway reminded her of late nights in hospital rooms, staring at Dee Dee's silhouette as she whispered to doctors about another fabricated illness. The smell of microwaved oatmeal took her back to mornings where her mother spoon-fed her, smiling sweetly, the back of the spoon scraping against her lips just a little too firmly, a silent warning to play along. Personal life and motherhood. When Gypsy Rose Blanchard stepped out of prison on the cold December morning in 2023, the world she once knew had changed. The air felt different, crisper, freer. The sky, stretching endlessly above her, no longer felt like the limited view she had from behind metal bars. Cameras flashed. Reporters clamored for a statement. But in that moment, all Gypsy could think about was the simple, quiet fact: she was free. But what does freedom really mean when you've never had it before? In the months following her release, Gypsy found herself navigating unfamiliar territory, dating, making independent choices, and living life on her own terms. She reconnected with Ken Urker, her former fiancé, someone who had stood by her side even while she was incarcerated. Their love story had started years before, written in letters, built on late-night calls and shared dreams of a future beyond prison walls. Now, with no barriers between them, they embraced the reality of being together. Ken wasn't just another relationship. He represented something Gypsy had never truly experienced: unconditional love, without manipulation, without control. For the first time, she wasn't someone's puppet. She wasn't under her mother's watchful eyes, nor the scrutiny of prison guards. She was just Gypsy, but there was something more, something that would redefine her existence forever. On December 28, 2024, exactly 1 year after her release, Gypsy gave birth to a baby girl, Aurora Raina Urker. Imagine that moment: the sterile scent of the hospital room, the beeping of monitors, the gentle hum of nurses moving about, and then the sound that changed everything: Aurora's first cry, piercing the air, filling Gypsy's heart in a way nothing ever had before. As she held her daughter for the first time, her fingers trembling, she felt an overwhelming wave of emotions: relief, joy, fear. Could she be the mother she never had? Would she break the cycle? In that quiet hospital room, she whispered to her newborn, "You are safe. I promise you will always be safe." It was a promise not just to Aurora, but to herself. Gypsy had spent her entire life being controlled, first by Dee Dee, then by the justice system. But as a mother, she had the power to do things differently. She and Ken set up a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. A home where Aurora would be free to be herself, to grow, to question, to live without fear. No unnecessary doctor's visits, no fabricated illnesses, no lies. But society wasn't quick to forget Gypsy's past. Rumors began circulating online, with Child Protective Services investigating her. Was her baby at risk? Could a convicted felon be a fit mother? Gypsy addressed it all with the same clarity she had fought to gain over the years. Aurora is safe, healthy, and loved. I am not my mother. The world watched. Some still doubted. But for Gypsy, there was only one truth: Aurora would never know the pain she once endured. As she settles into motherhood, Gypsy knows challenges lie ahead. She is still on parole until June 2025, still rebuilding a life that was stolen from her. But she is no longer the frightened girl in a wheelchair, nor the inmate behind bars. She is Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a mother, a survivor, and for the first time, the writer of her own story. A life reclaimed. The early morning light spills through the curtains of a modest home in Louisiana. A soft pink glow washes over the nursery, where tiny stars are painted across the ceiling. A white crib stands in the corner, rocking ever so slightly as a newborn shifts beneath a floral blanket. In the quiet of the morning, Gypsy Rose Blanchard sits in a rocking chair, cradling her daughter. Her fingers trace small circles on the baby's back, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of her breaths. For years, Gypsy dreamed of freedom, not just from prison, but from the invisible chains that had bound her long before her mother's murder. Now, at 33 years old, she's finally living a life that is truly hers. No more feeding tubes, no more wheelchairs, no more forced hospital visits. The world outside is vast and unpredictable, but for the first time, she gets to decide how she navigates it. Despite her release, Gypsy is not entirely free, not yet. She remains on parole, a lingering reminder of her past. Every check-in with her parole officer, every requirement she must fulfill, serves as a tether to a life she's still trying to move beyond. But compared to the life she once knew, this is liberation. The internet has not been kind to her. Some call her a survivor. Others label her a murderer. Each time she scrolls through social media, she is met with a tidal wave of opinion supporters urging her to embrace this second chance, critics questioning whether she deserved it. Then there are the rumors. In late February, whispers spread across TikTok and YouTube that Child Protective Services have been called to check on her baby. The claims painted her as an unfit mother, stirring up memories of her own childhood trauma. But Gypsy was quick to respond. No, CPS was not at my house. Aurora is very safe and healthy. Please don't spread lies. Her words are firm, but the shadows in her eyes betray a deeper truth. This is the price of her notoriety. No matter how much time passes, her name will always carry the weight of the past. June 2025 looms on the horizon. Just a few months stand between Gypsy and the end of her parole. In interviews, she speaks about it with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. A whole new world is about to open up. She imagines the day she no longer has to check in with authorities, no longer has to live under any form of restriction. The simple things: traveling without permission, making spontaneous plans, living life without a legal shadow will finally be hers. But freedom is a double-edged sword. Without the structure of parole, the choices will be entirely hers to make. And for someone whose entire life was dictated by another, first by her mother, then by the justice system, stepping into complete independence is as terrifying as it is exhilarating. Gypsy has spoken about wanting to use her experiences to help others, advocating for victims of Munchausen by proxy, sharing her story to prevent others from suffering as she did. Whether she will fully step into the role remains uncertain. For now, her focus is on being a mother, on creating the kind of childhood for Aurora that she never had, one filled with love, freedom, and honesty. But the past does not fade so easily. Everywhere she goes, eyes follow. Every decision she makes, every misstep, is scrutinized under the relentless gaze of the public. Some believe she should have spent more time in prison. Others see her as the ultimate example of resilience. Who is Gypsy Rose Blanchard, really? A victim? A survivor? A criminal? The answer depends on who you ask. But for Gypsy, the answer is simple. She is free, and for the first time, she gets to decide what that truly means. So, here we are at the end of a story that is still being written. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is no longer the frail, wheelchair-bound girl the world once knew. She is a mother, a woman rebuilding her life, a figure forever caught between victimhood and infamy. But the question remains, can Gypsy ever truly escape her past? Her name will always be tied to one of the most disturbing cases of medical abuse and deception in modern history. Every move she makes is under scrutiny. Every choice she takes sparks debate. And as she inches closer to complete freedom, the world will be watching. Was justice served? Has Gypsy paid her debt? Or does the shadow of her crime still linger? Should she be left alone to live her life? Or is this the price she will always have to pay? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into cases like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and always question the stories you think you know.